When I had graduated high school, I was really looking forward to college. I partially wanted to start over, like most people did, and be the person I wish I was while I was in high school. But I also really wanted a boyfriend. I only had one during high school, and that lasted maybe 3 months. However, being as socially awkward as I was, I didn't know the first thing about meeting a guy. My best friend Cora and I went to the same university together and high school. Now, for those of you who have never been to college, most of them have freshman orientation or meetups before classes start, so freshmen can get to know one another without the pressure of being surrounded by upperclassmen. I wanted to go in, not looking like a nerd or a wallflower, so my friend Cora decided to give me a makeover. I wore a pink dress for the first time since I was 4 and had my hair and makeup done too. Cora and I had only been there at the orientation for maybe an hour when this really cute looking guy came up to me. He introduced himself as Trevor and asked me for my name. Cora gave me a sly smile as she waltzed away to meet new people and give Trevor and I some space. We talked for a bit, and it went great. He was very attentive and complimented me a lot, especially my hair and makeup. We talked the rest of the night. The meetup was only a few hours long before we had to exit campus, and when the time came, I began looking for Cora. I saw her over in the corner talking to a group of people, not paying attention to me. Trevor offered to walk me to my car and wait there with me until Cora was ready to go. Now, me being stupid and desperate as a freshman, I agreed, just excited that a guy was giving me any kind of attention whatsoever. It was dark by the time the meetup was over, maybe around 9 or so. I let Trevor sit in the car with me as we waited for Cora. We talked for a bit and turned on the radio just to keep the mood going. But as we continued to wait, Trevor began to act weird. He kept trying to hold my hand, even though I repeatedly pulled them away until finally I just sat on them. He then reached across the car and began rubbing my neck, making me feel more uncomfortable. I asked him to keep his hands to himself, but he told me I needed to relax and that he had no intention of trying anything with me. I began to get annoyed. He continued to put his hands on my thighs. Eventually, I pushed him away and demanded that he get out of my car since clearly he wasn't listening to me. But when I did this, he immediately looked at me with this sort of creepy glare. He stared at me like that for a good 10 seconds or so, but then his face relaxed and he put his hands up. He said he didn't realize I was such a prude before he exited my car. As he got out, Cora knocked on my door window. She waved at me and walked to the other side to get in the passenger seat as Trevor continued to walk away. She asked me if I was okay. I told her I was, and that's when she said, as she was walking over to the passenger side of the car, Trevor was mumbling to himself, cursing and muttering something about perfect timing. I told her I kicked him out of my car because he was being creepy. She and I agreed that I did the right thing as I drove away. Fast forward a couple months. Halloween had just ended and, with it, homecoming. There were massive parties, of which I participated in, but the creepy part was after the scary holiday. Our university sends out reports of crimes committed on or near our campus within 15 miles due to the area that it's in. I woke up to an email of a girl who was brutally raped and beaten over the weekend after leaving a frat party by a guy she had met at the party. Now, at first, I didn't think much of it and went on about my day. Then, Cora texted me. She had watched the news later that day and sent me the link to the broadcast online. It turns out that the rapist was none other than Trevor. I paused the video with his mugshot in the upper right-hand corner of the screen next to the reporter's face. I immediately began to feel ill. My mind flashed back to the night I had met Trevor at the orientation earlier that semester, to when he was talking to me, complimenting me, and touching me. And even creepier, when Cora told me he was cursing and muttering about perfect timing. This experience has taught me a lot about dating. Don't trust any guy, or girl for that matter, that automatically gives you attention. It may not be the kind you actually want. So, to Trevor, whom I met at the orientation, let's not meet again. When I was in high school, I had the biggest crush on my neighbor, whom I'll call Joe. Joe and I didn't go to the same school. He was 2 years older than me, but attended public school, whereas my parents opted to send me to a private Catholic school. And he and I never spoke, as he lived on the opposite side of the street. I just remember seeing him outside all the time, either mowing the grass or washing his car, so I was pretty ecstatic when he asked me on a date when I graduated high school. I was only 18 at the time and was attending a commuter college. He had chosen to go to a technical school, so while I was still in high school, he lived at home and told me he started noticing me as I matured. Like I said, I was so excited that a cute guy had noticed me that I didn't care why he asked me out. I was the ugly duckling kid that didn't fully escape puberty until literally graduation, so I never had a boyfriend or even my first kiss. My first red flag went way over my head. He suggested a Netflix and pizza night at his place. He said his parents were out of town that weekend, and we could have the place to ourselves. I figured this was okay, since if anything bad happened, my house was only just down the street. And my family knew who Joe was, even though our families never communicated. My second red flag came the night of our date. We were supposed to hang out around 6 that night for a couple hours, but he asked to push it back to 9. Now, I can't remember the reason why, but it did strike me as odd, as it was a Thursday night, and therefore we both had classes the next morning. So eager to have a date, I ignored this red flag and promptly agreed to meet him. The date was fine at first, until he started trying to put his hand up my skirt and then down my shirt. He even began trying to play with my hair and kiss my neck. I've seen this before in movies, so at first I just playfully pushed him away. But after about a half hour, it began to get annoying. I eventually told him that I didn't know what kind of girl he thought I was, but I had no intention of doing anything with him but watch a movie and then go home. This seemed to enrage him for a moment. He looked at me briefly, but that seemed to get him off of me. He sat on the other end of the couch as we watched some random horror movie from the 80s that I had never heard of before. But when that movie ended and I got up to leave, he grabbed me by my wrist. I asked him to let me go, but he was squeezing it really hard. So hard that I started getting that tingling feeling when blood circulation gets cut off. I again demanded he let me go, but he wouldn't. I tried walking towards the door anyway, but with Joe being so large and burly, I literally went nowhere. He yanked me by my wrist, and I fell back on the couch. I asked what he was doing, but before I could stand up again, he had pushed me back on the couch and laid on top of me. The weight of his body made it hard to breathe. He started kissing me all over my face, holding my wrists together at the top of my head. I started to really get scared at this point. All those lectures at school, and from my mom and articles I read saying no means no, truly began flooding back into my mind with a force. It began sinking in that this man had every intention of raping me. I started panicking, but unfortunately, I was entirely too small compared to Joe. However, the gods must have been smiling over me because Joe, in his quest for my lady parts, released me to sit up and undo his belt buckle. With my hands free, I took this chance to reach around for something to defend myself with. Ironic or not, I ended up grabbing the table lamp. My grip firm, I wailed it across the side of Joe's face, completely knocking him off his balance onto the floor. I jumped up and ran to the door. Luckily, I left my bag with my phone in the pocket next to it. I snatched my phone and hit the home button. I was too frantic to remember the password, so I hit the emergency option in the bottom corner of the phone. I turned around and saw Joe coming after me. He stopped when I held my phone out with the emergency call screen displayed. I grabbed an umbrella that was in the basket next to the door and held it to Joe's neck. It was one of those old school ones with a pointer at the end. I told Joe that if he touched me, I was going to call the police and he had better let me go. He looked angry. He had a huge red mark and cut on the side of his face close to his eye where I had hit him with the lamp. I picked up my bag and slowly began backing out of the door, still breathing hard. Joe continued staring at me, and as I opened the door to leave, he gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes as he called me a stupid bitch and said that one day he would kill me. I closed the door behind me and looked back into the window and saw something that still disturbs me to my core. Joe was smiling at me. And it wasn't a regular smile. It was a creepy one that you see villains have when they're enjoying murdering someone. When I got home, my parents asked me how the date went. I smiled and said that I think we were just going to be friends before going upstairs to my room and crying about what happened. I never told anyone the true story about this date. And the only reason I'm speaking up now is, well, this incident happened only a year ago. And I was watching the news about a month ago, and it said there was a girl who had claimed she was raped after going on a date with some guy. And it didn't strike me as odd at first. I'm not sure if I'm desensitized or not, but those types of stories are a dime a dozen where I'm from. So I wasn't really fazed. But then a few nights later, there were a bunch of cop cars in front of Joe's house. It turns out he was the guy she went on the date with. Now, I don't know if Joe did it or not, but some part of me feels guilty for not speaking up sooner. I very well could have stopped this from happening if only I had called attention to Joe's actions when he forced himself on me. But I didn't. And because I didn't, I may have just put someone else in danger. So, to the girl who went on the date with Joe, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I'm sorry that I was a coward, and I'm sorry that you had to suffer because of me. And to Joe, let's not meet again.